Commander Vexwrath stood 7 feet tall, with scales the color of dark iron and claws that could tear through ship metal. He had fought in 30 campaigns across 12 star systems. He had killed enemies that most soldiers only saw in nightmares. Yet today, he stood confused in a training yard on the border moon of Keth 4, watching something he could not explain. The human woman was small, ridiculously small by Kethrani standards. She barely reached the chest of a juvenile warrior, and her soft pink skin had no armor, no scales, no natural protection of any kind. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she was supposed to be a simple translator assigned to help with cultural exchange programs between the Galactic Coalition and Earth. But the Cubs would not fight without her. Vexwrath had arrived to inspect the training of the newest batch of Kethrani warriors. These were children by their species standards, barely past their first molting, soft-scaled and eager to prove themselves. The training masters had reported excellent progress until 2 weeks ago. Then everything stopped. "Show me," Vexwrath had demanded. The training master, a scarred veteran named Groth, had led him to the yard. 50 cubs stood in formation, training weapons in their claws, ready for combat drills. Groth gave the signal to begin. Nothing happened. The cubs stood perfectly still. Their eyes were not on Groth. They were looking toward the small building at the edge of the yard where the human staff quarters were located. "What is the meaning of this?" Vexwrath growled. "Watch, Commander," Groth said. There was something strange in his voice. Not anger, something closer to wonder. A door opened. The human woman walked out. She was carrying a container of some dark liquid that humans seemed to need for morning function. She looked at the cubs. She smiled. Then she raised her free hand and made a simple gesture, just a small wave of her fingers. The cubs exploded into motion. The drill began with perfect precision. Every strike, every block, every formation change happened exactly as trained. The performance was flawless. Vexwrath watched for 10 minutes. When the drill ended, the cubs did not look to Groth for approval. They looked to the human. She clapped her soft hands together and called out words in her strange language. The cubs practically glowed with pride. "Explain this," Vexwrath demanded. Sarah Chen approached him without fear. This was unusual. Most species found the Kethrani terrifying at first contact. She looked up at him with calm brown eyes. "They just needed encouragement," she said. "Your training methods are very harsh. The cubs were scared. They were failing because fear was blocking their learning. I just helped them feel safe enough to try." "Safe?" Vexwrath could not understand this word in this context. "They are warriors. Safety is not relevant." "Commander, with respect, they are children. On my world, we have learned that children learn best when they feel supported. When they know that failure will not bring punishment, only correction. When they know someone believes in them." Vexwrath looked at the cubs. They were still watching the human. One of them, a small female with unusual gray scales, had moved closer to Sarah. The human reached out and touched the cub's head gently. The cub made a sound of contentment that Vexwrath had not heard from a Kethrani youth in his entire military career. "How did you do this?" he asked. Sarah shrugged. It was a human gesture that Vexwrath had learned meant uncertainty or dismissal of importance. "I just talked to them, asked them about their fears, told them stories about human children learning difficult things, showed them that making mistakes is part of getting better, and I promised them that I would be here to watch them succeed." "You promised?" "Yes." Vexwrath considered this. In Kethrani culture, a promise was a binding oath. To break it meant death or exile. Humans, he had been told, made promises easily and broke them often. "What happens if you break this promise?" Sarah looked at the cubs. The gray-scaled female was now holding her hand. Several others had gathered closer, their young eyes full of something that Vexwrath slowly recognized as trust. "I won't," she said simply. I won't break my promise to them. That had been 6 months ago. Vexrath returned to Keth 4 today because the reports had become impossible to ignore. The Cubs from Sarah's group had graduated to intermediate training 3 months ahead of schedule. Their combat scores were the highest in the sector. Their unit cohesion was unlike anything the training masters had seen before, and now it was spreading. Other training groups had requested human observers. Word had traveled to other moons, other worlds. The Kethrani High Command was receiving constant messages asking the same question: can we get a human? But there was only one Sarah Chen. Vexarath found her in a new training yard, much larger than before. She was surrounded not by 50 cubs, but by 300. They ranged in age from newly molted to nearly adult, and they were all watching her. She was teaching them something. Vexrath moved closer to listen. Fear is not weakness, Sarah was saying. A translation device converted her words to Kethrani speech, but somehow her voice still carried its original warmth. Fear is information. It tells you that something important is happening. The bravest warriors are not the ones without fear. They are the ones who feel the fear and choose to act anyway. A young male raised his claw. Teacher Chen, how do humans fight their fear? Sarah smiled. We breathe. We remember our training. And we remember the people standing beside us. We remember that we are not alone. The young male looked at the cubs around him. Something changed in his posture. He stood taller. Now, Sarah said, let us practice. Remember, mistakes are teachers. Every fall is a lesson in how to stand. Every failure is a step toward success. Are you ready? 300 voices answered as one. The sound shook the air. Sarah raised her hand. She gave the signal. The training began. Vexarath watched for an hour. The cubs fought hard. They made mistakes. When they fell, they got up. When they failed, they tried again. And through it all, Sarah moved among them. She corrected technique with gentle touches. She offered praise with her strange human sounds. She gave encouragement with her eyes, her voice, her presence. The training masters stood at the edges of the yard. They were no longer teaching. They were learning. After the session ended, Vexarath approached Sarah. Around them, cubs were helping each other, checking for injuries, sharing water. The atmosphere was nothing like any Kethrani training facility Vexarath had ever seen. The High Command has made a decision, Vexarath said. Sarah looked up at him. She seemed tired but content. Oh? They want you to address the War College. They want you to teach our methods to the generals and training masters. Sarah laughed. It was a strange sound, but Vexarath had learned that human laughter often meant surprise or disbelief, not mockery. Me? Teach your generals? I'm just a translator. You were a translator. Now you are something else. Vexarath paused. He was not skilled with words. Fighting was easier. But he tried. You have shown us that strength does not only come from muscle and scale, it comes from somewhere else. Somewhere humans seem to understand better than we do. Heart, Sarah said softly. It comes from heart. Then you will teach this heart to our commanders. Starting next month, every major training drill in the Kethrani military will begin with your signal. The High Command has ordered it. Sarah stared at him. Every drill? That's thousands of warriors. Yes, I'm one person. Then we will bring your image to every training yard through holo projection. We will bring your voice through every speaker. Every Kethrani warrior will know you. Every drill will begin when you give the word. Sarah looked back at the cubs. The gray-scaled female from the first group was there, no longer small, no longer afraid. She was helping younger cubs with their stances. She was teaching them what Sarah had taught her. Commander, Sarah said, may I ask why? Really why? Vexarath was silent for a moment. Then he spoke words that no Kethrani commander had ever spoken about a human. Because you taught our children to be brave by teaching them it was safe to be afraid. Because you showed them that care is not weakness. Because you believed in them before they believed in themselves. He paused. And because when you gave them that belief, they became stronger than any Kethrani I have ever trained. Sarah wiped her eyes. Water was leaking from them. Vexwrath knew this was a human emotional response, not a sign of damage. Okay, she said finally. I'll do it, but I have conditions. Name them. Every training facility must have rest periods. No cub trains for more than 4 hours without a break. No cub is punished for honest failure. Only for giving up. And every training master must learn to praise as often as they correct. Vexwrath considered. These conditions would change Kethrani military tradition forever. They would face resistance, anger, accusations of weakness. But he thought of the cubs in this yard. He thought of their strength, their unity, their fire. Agreed, he said. Sarah nodded. Then she turned back to the yard. A new group of cubs was arriving for afternoon training. They looked scared, uncertain, exactly as the first group had looked 6 months ago. Sarah walked toward them. She knelt down to their level. She smiled. "Hello," she said. "My name is Sarah. I'm going to be here with you while you train. Would you like to hear a story about a very brave young warrior who was afraid of everything?" The cubs gathered closer. They listened. In the distance, Vexwrath watched. And for the first time in his long career of war and death and iron discipline, he understood something that humans had always known. The strongest army is not the one with the most weapons or the hardest scales. The strongest army is the one that fights for each other. Sarah Chen raised her hand. The signal was given, and across the yard 300 voices rose together. Not in fear, in hope. The drill began.